Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, I wanted to record a guide to Baran the Crusader, one of the Conquerors of the Atlas. This is a fight that you will do multiple times through Endgame, starting from about tier 5 maps, and then you'll fight him in increasing tiers until towards actual higher level Endgame. You'll only ever encounter him in tier 14, 15, and 16 maps. Now, whilst a lot of the other Conquerors of the Atlas, the fight feels very similar, just with the monsters having higher stats as the tier of the map increases, with Baran there's an interesting change. One of his most visually obvious attacks, a skill called Monorunes, is very different mechanically. In the 0 Watchstone version, so the tier 3, 4, or 5 version that you'll encounter first, to what it is in the higher tier maps. The reason for that is that the cooldown for this skill that Baran has decreases. The skill lasts for 18 seconds, and if you're fighting him in a 0 Watchstone map, he has a 20-second cooldown on it. If you're fighting him in a 3 or 4 Watchstone map, the cooldown is 17.5 or 16.5 seconds respectively. This means that this skill overlaps once you're fighting him in a 3 or 4 Watchstone map. That causes some changes. So without further ado, I'm going to go into the actual Crusader's Sanctum, the zone that you fight him in, and you'll see that it's a 4x4 grid of tiles on the ground. Monorunes is his most, as I said, most visually impressive skill, and what it does is it electrifies the tile that you're on, plus every tile that is in the same row and every tile in the same column. So if I was standing here and Baran cast Monorunes, this tile, this tile, this tile, this tile, this tile, this tile, and the one that's off the screen here would all become electrified. This electricity looks much more dangerous than it is. It does hurt, and you need to take it. You need to respect it, but it's not going to kill you if you just briefly stand on it. What it does is it's the same as the Baronite Monorunes inside the Baran influence maps. It will cause you to take lightning damage over time, and it will also drain your character's mana. The thing you need to be very conscious of is that this mana drain can put you in a situation where you cannot use a movement skill. So you'll see that I use Flame Dash, and I actually use Flame Dash linked to faster casting and to Arcane Surge. This means that if I have no way of casting Flame Dash, if I'm on less than 36 mana. One option that you've got to get around this is to use the support gem Blood Magic and link that to your movement skill. Then if you wind up on a mana rune, you can just still teleport away from it and just take a small amount of damage instead, or life loss from your Blood Magic. However, for most people, you'll just want to use your normal skill set on Baran, so that's something that's not an option. However, we've talked a lot about Monorunes. Let's talk about his other skills. He has a massive overhead slam, which deals physical and lightning damage. And if Baran is facing downwards, if he was where my character is facing downwards, it would hit roughly this area here. So it's most of a tile. This slam is very, very, very slow, and actually deals less damage than it looks like. I was hit by it the last time I did this fight because I was stuffing around. I wasn't being careful. And it didn't one-shot my character, but it came close. And I've certainly not built this character defensively. So it's something you can endure, but you shouldn't because it's so easy to avoid. However, those are his two easy attacks. They're slow. The big one that you need to watch out for is his default attack. Where a lot of other endgame bosses have some sort of melee attack that they use, Baran uses spells even when you're in close range. And he uses something that's not too dissimilar to the player skill Storm Call. He will put a number of runes on the ground, and then a short time later they will explode. They do a lot of physical damage, but that physical damage is 75% converted to lightning. What this means is that it's important to have both defenses against physical damage and against lightning damage. You'll need to have obviously a 75% lightning resistance that you kind of need to have once you're properly into endgame. You need to have 75% to all the elemental resistances. But it is really helpful to run a skill like Purity of Lightning to get that lightning resist up into the stratosphere. If you can't do that though, if you're working on 75%, you need to take into account that this skill is deadly. Now, these runes are placed down and then they explode about a second later. I think it may even be less than a second later. What this means is that if you stand still for a second, Baran can pretty much kill you. He can put all of his runes on top of you at once, and sometimes he'll do that. And then if you don't get away from them quickly, you're going to be dead. If you're in close combat range, so if you're playing a melee character, what you should be doing is make one attack, then reposition your character, then make one attack, reposition, one attack, reposition. And this favors melee builds that do damage over time, such as poison, but particularly such as bleed. If you're playing a ranged character, you need to be very conscious to keep moving all the time. Hit and run, hit and run, hit and run. You can build a character that's so tanky that they don't care about Baran's storm calls, but it's not going to be the norm. Anyway, let's go and actually start the fight at this point. He taunts you for a little bit, you get a chance to prepare some damage, and now he's going to... There's his default attack skill, and here's his Monorunes. See how he's conjuring up for a long time. Now, notice how all of those squares are dangerous now. What we're going to do is we're just going to keep dropping them in alternate corners. So every time that he casts Monorunes, I'm going to move to opposite corners. There he goes again. And I'm going to let it drop there. Here's his slam. And you'll notice 7 projectiles fire out, and that I was shocked afterwards because I let one of the projectiles hit me deliberately. That shock is significant, and you don't want to laugh it off. It's scary. Baran is firing off another Monorunes at this point. And here's his melee slam. Notice how there's a slight overlap between the Monorunes, and that's the case on the 3 and 4 Watchstone versions, as I was saying before. Here's his Monorunes again. So get there and let him have his little tantrum. You'll notice he has that skill where he teleports to you. That can be a good chance to get in some damage. Here's his Monorunes again. This should probably be him down in a second. I will just demonstrate how little Monorune expired before I could demonstrate. That's the amount of damage the Monorunes do. It's not lethal, but it will mess you up if you're taking other damage as well. And there he goes. So, all in all, this fight is one that the more damage you've got, the less you need, the less opportunities there are for mistakes. But the key point is, as flashy as the Monorunes are, they're not nearly as dangerous as they look. So that's something to keep in mind. It is perfectly fine to run into the Monorunes area in order to avoid taking hits from those storm calls. The storm calls are the danger in this fight. They're brutal. They will rip you to shreds if you let them, and you would have seen the amount of damage that I took the few times that I made mistakes with them. Those were making a mistake with one of them. If you make a mistake with 2, the first one will hit you and shock you because it's lightning damage, and then the second one will likely outright kill you. If your character's tanky, the first one will hit you and shock you, the second one will hit you and give you a more intense shock, and then the third one will likely kill you. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. If you've got comments or questions, fire away below. Otherwise, I hope you have a good one.